Alright, as you guys can tell, this is a book I wrote. It's called Casalte's Blade. It is a work of fiction, but it's highly influenced by my family and my neighbors, my coworkers, friends, people that I've interacted with, and they would tell me their life stories. And I basically wrote it to honor I'm a third generation Filipino American, and I wrote this to honor my heritage because you don't see Filipino Americans, no less Filipinos, no less Stockton Filipinos, not even Southside Boggs Track Filipinos shown in any kind of media at all. If you are seen, you are a footnote in other people's stories. You, there's no main character energy. You're basically NPC, based from the time of um, the first arrivals in the Philippines back in Louisiana in the 1600s, 1700s, all the way to the 1920s to current day. You would basically see maybe some things going on YouTube with the now generation. Right now it's Gen Z going into Gen Alpha, which right now are little kids. So they're going to be the next generation coming up, Gen Alpha. But I wrote from the perspective of the Monum generation from the 1920s that were field workers, that were asparagus cutters, that were cherry pickers in Stockton, California, going 4 or 5 generations deep. This right here is a um, an illustration representing that 1940s generation in Stockton, California. This is I highly inspire. This is a work of fiction, but I'm highly inspired by my actual family. So what happens is I would use stories from my grandmother as a 20-something-year-old in Stockton, my grandfather as a late 20s, early 30s World War II veteran in Stockton, California, living in Stockton, California, coming back from a long, hard day's labor working the fields. Um, I was very vague when it came to what his role was, if he was a cutter, if he was a contractor, if he was this. The other illustration I use is this older gentleman and this Mexican dancer. The setting is 1948, Stockton, California, not set in the uh, the role of what's coming up in what they would call the taxi dancers. That was late 20s, all the way to World War II, a little bit after. What most of this is like more like a nightclub, but what happened, it was still persisted. There weren't a lot of Filipino women in Stockton, so what a lot of Filipino bachelors, especially older bachelors, this one represented is in his mid to late 40s. This woman is younger. She's a Mexican woman, early 20s. What happened was that Filipino men, the ratio of Filipino men to Filipino women in Stockton, California, in the Central Valley in California at the time was still low. That Monum generation still had that attitude of like, you know what, get in where you fit in. If you can find a nice senorita that's Mexican, that was what, or a white girl or a black African American woman, they would develop relationships, friendships. They would develop marriages from that, courtships, and also dating. So that's represented by this picture. So some people have said, what is this story about? How do you pronounce the name of the book? It's called Casalte's Blade. And basically, I'll go through a couple of the stories. So, one of the stories, the very first story that's in here, is called Her Name is Beautiful. Now, Her Name is Beautiful is where I got this story was a compilation of stories that was mixed in from a previous story I developed in 2012. That story was a tale of a administrative assistant, or what you would call a secretary, that was mestiza, that was had a love triangle with a uh, what do you say, a warehouse worker. Now this is 2012, before Amazon, or during that Amazon warehouse beginning phase, but it wasn't taking place at Amazon. It wasn't an Amazon warehouse, so they didn't have any robots or anything. So that first story right here is Her Name is Beautiful, and I got that story from a couple places. I had friends that were involved in the pharmaceutical, basically working at drugstores, working as pharmacists, studying to be pharmacists, and I got that idea for Stanley. So the main character in the story is Stanley Estayan. I got the name Estayan from a combination of a couple friends of mine, that their last name was similar to Estayan, but it was something else. And then I got this character for Lana Barnabas as a character. That goes, and oh, also the character of the dog Maganda. I had a dog named Maganda that was a Labrador pit bull mix. So going on to the story, Her Name is Beautiful. It talks about the human resource director, Lana Barnabas. Now her situation, I got that from. I have family members that are part Filipino and part white, but they're from my aunt was from Oklahoma, and there's a term they use from people from Oklahoma back in the 50s, 60s, 70s. Grapes of Wrath called it. They would call them the Okies. So I got her character as like a fifth generation Okie or something. How do you rise in the ranks from being an Okie to that came from the Dust Bowl era to being a modern day, at the time 2012 era, to be a modern day a manager, a supervisor in one of the top warehouses in the Central Valley. So that's where I got her character from. Another aspect from the story, as we go on, I'm on page 12, go all the way to, where do we go to? Go to page 13, the end of the story. When we get to the end of the story, what I get from that was, and I'm trying not to give spoilers, but at the same time, I'm really excited to share these stories. What happens is, the fact is that people have asked me, why do you write from this perspective of two people? And there was a movie that was out recently. The character asks, so you want to write romance? And the woman says, I don't want to write a romance, I want to write a love story. And I've told you guys before, I'm a writer that writes parables, of Christian parables. Some people have to look in the symbolism before they find the meaning, and I try to be clear with it. I am a Christian. I write from that perspective that you can have all the stuff in the world, but when it comes down to life itself, the ultimate love story, and well, like I said, the character said in the movie, you're going to write a romance. She goes, no, I'm writing a love story, and there's a difference. And what I have to share is I feel the same way when it comes to my writing. I'm writing love stories to God. So people have asked me, why do your stories, some of them end tragically? And I'm saying, well, the end is not there. The end is in Jesus. If you can find Jesus through the pain, that's what you're going to find where the hope and the glory is. The next one is a short story, Jack Looks On. Jack Looks On was based upon some real life events from my life that I've incorporated into a short uh, fictional account. That we'll just say that. Well, no spoilers for that one. Let's see, for the next one is going to be, this is the top one, one of the top stories. Where is it at? Welcome to Nethical Land. Okay, that is a story of, it begins where the two main stories intersect. I that is basically a representation of corporate America. And I'm not going to say which corporation, which store this Nethco represents, but we had a lot of department stores that happened started in the 1800s, 1900s, and they became big conglomerates later on. And what happened was, you could tell when these stories, when these department stores happened, a lot of this stuff, went on. They became big, massive corporations, and I wanted to showcase my time working in the department store as sales support. You can see the cashiers, you can see the workers, you can see the security guards. Even the one group of people that you don't see is sales support. If you do see sales support, they're basically out of sight, out of mind. They're the ones getting the clothes prepped in the morning. That's what I did for 6 years. They got prepped. The stores prepped in the morning. They got everything put on the shelves. The clothes put on the shelves, put on the hangers, put on the shelving. They put the merchandise before the store opens, and they leave pretty much a half hour after the store opens. For the majority, it used to be that way. Now, some corporations have disappeared because of COVID, and people aren't shopping the way they used to. But I did this story based upon that, and that's all I'm going to say about that one, because I try to leave things up as stories for what they really are. Going into, this is a long story too. It goes all the way to different things, areas, and I try to what the thing is with me is, like, I like watching Christian movies, but the problem with Christian movies is they tend to be corny. The message is just so in your face that you forget. You want to be entertained. Also, you want to be shown something while you're being ministered to, and it has to be in a situation and a circumstance where it flows organically. That's why I started writing stuff like this. See, 14, chapter 15. It goes all the way, let's see here. And then we get to, it's a long story. And then where else are we at here? I had, in the middle, I incorporated a couple poems. Do Hearts Belong to Mammon? That's a poem that I wrote. I wanted to just really be in tune with this stuff. Another story is Marina's Fella. Now, this was written in 2012. I'm repurposing it, telling it again, for the fact that my earlier editions aren't for sale as the large print edition. So I've added it to this collection. That is a story of my grandfather on my mother's side and my grandmother. But what I did was I changed things around for a contemporary audience at the time, 2012. What I would like to share is the fact is that the character of Regino Illustrato is based upon my grandfather, Regino Illustrissimo. One of the big problems he had growing up, and he didn't really see it as a problem, but his last name was changed when he came over to the United States. So something happens when you turn to the United States, when you come here as an immigrant. You your identity changes. So I wrote that. I wrote the stories of how he got tattooed. And you just remember, I switched things around for a reason. One of the reasons is for legal reasons. Another thing is compiling different stories into certain characters and making composite characters. That's what I do.